Bismillahi walhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillahi. I wanted to talk about the issue of Muslim marriage and a few concepts which seem to come up in counseling. Sorry about that. I wanted to talk about four major concepts which are a bit complicated, but they deal with the issue of some of the main problems that people are encountering in marriage, and they're not able to work through them, and it leads to some serious issues. And this discussion really is one which requires a lot of thought and requires a lot of insight to really what's going on. It just requires a lot of study to understand. I want to tell people first of all that Dr. Amos Wilson, who was a prominent black psychologist and philosopher in the 80s, he did an analysis on relationships, and it was probably one of the most thoughtful and naked analyses that are out there in terms of the whole concept of love and relationships and how it relates to the economy and what's going on in the community. And he did it in the context specifically of the black community. But I believe that the type of research that he put in is in many ways a research that has characteristics which are universal and apply to communities living under capitalism and communities living under liberalism, which basically does not confuse the issue. But let's talk about liberalism just simply being put as individualism and the assertion of individual rights. Don't get this stuff confused, because most of the people talking about liberalism, they haven't studied Western philosophy, Western history, Western law enough to be able to properly talk about liberalism. It comes down to just that, the individual being sovereign. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about, which is key here, is the idea of compatibility, right? The idea of roles, the idea of sex, the idea of duty. And along with that comes other things. When we talk about sex, we talk about intimacy. When we talk about roles, we talk about expectations. When we talk about duty, we talk about the concept of romance. And there's no way that I'm going to be able to encompass everything that needs to be encompassed in this one session, especially because I'm in between doing things here, and my mind is I'm trying to give my mind to this while I'm utilizing the time to basically I'm on my way somewhere, and so I'm split mentally. First of all, I wanted to say that compatibility, from the basic research that I've done in the fiqh, and the fiqh is the thinking of the scholars on the Quran and the Sunnah. In my estimation, there's no way that compatibility, as is characterized in the fiqh, is something that we can operate from in today's time. No way. It's not developed enough. And that's why I said there's so much that goes into this. First of all, societies are completely different than what they were in the past. There's been a number of what they call revolutions, beginning with, scientific revolutions, and, the industrial revolution, and the, information revolution. There's been a number of revolutions that have taken place in the West that have forced the whole globe to changing the way that things were done on the level of economy and the level of social interaction. When you start talking about moving to cash-based societies, it's a whole different dynamic, a whole different type of lifestyle. When you need cash to survive versus having your basic needs already intact. You know what I'm saying? And it being more of an issue of what? It being more of an issue of you just going out to get what you need from the land. In other words, agricultural life or even nomadic life is not the life of living in a stabilized city that is based on cash. And even that was known in the past. That the life of the city is not like other types of lifestyles. So things have changed dramatically, and so compatibility has to be looked at on a number of different levels. Right? Compatibility has to be looked at a number of different levels, and people just don't know. Like, people have a list of things that they look for, and they call that compatibility. Versus qualities, they have a list. You know what I'm saying? And so they have a list. Well, the person, has, is this tall. Well, the person has this amount of money. The person has this. All of that. The things that they're looking for in terms of compatibility are not enough to build a relationship in today's time. They're more stuck in, a magazine, idealistic, glamour type of concept of compatibility. Solely on looks and, solely on money, and solely on certain things. And so that needs a whole new discussion that will allow us to flesh out what we mean by compatibility in today's time, in light of the fiqh, no doubt, and in light of the sharia. But we have to realize that those discussions that took place in the past, they're limited. And for the traditional brothers, it's not my problem. You're not students of sociology, you're not students of psychology, you're not students of anthropology, so stay in your place. That's basically what it comes down to. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes we have to flex, because our aim is in building the community. Our aim is not in preserving what's in a particular text, except that which is in the Quran and that which is in the Sunnah. Our game plan is not just to imitate what was in another society or what was done 500 years ago or this or that. There's no way that you can apply what was applied 500 years ago in the same way that was applied 500 years ago in today's time. Not in these modern environments in which there's a lot of different challenges, right? A lot of different challenges. And so when we talk about roles and expectations, we're looking at the fiqh, and we're looking at certain concepts that don't match with the economy. And so when we look at the reality of where it is that the Quran and Sunnah is at, we haven't explored it enough. I'll give you an example. Imam al-Qurtubi rahmatullahi alayhi, when he talks about الرجال مقومون على النساء الرجال قوامين على النساء, he talks about, because I'm driving, I had a text that just came in. He talks about the whole concept of the way that he characterizes qawwama is he opens, if there's deficiency. Sorry about that, the internet dropped off. So remember, al-Qurtubi opens up discussion, so that if there's deficiencies in the role of the male to provide, then what begins to happen is that the voice of the woman becomes more determined. That's exactly where we're at. But see, that stuff is not flushed out properly. what we're at is that we're at a stage where the economy is making demands of people in order to survive. For the majority of people, because everybody's not a doctor, everybody's not what we would call, an accomplished businessman, and so there's, of course, you're going to find that many relationships is going to be a two-salary relationship. The economic policy, and this is where, the whole concept of government and power becomes important. People try to deny that, say, we don't talk about politics, that type of thing. But in reality, certain policies that are put in place that allow business to operate in a certain way, certain policies that, allow certain things to happen with rent and all of this, it eventually, at the end of the day, is going to come back to attack the family. It's going to come back to hit the family. And so it's going to change the family dynamics. And we know this. This is one of the reasons why I said people who are not versed enough in sociology and history and anthropology and political science, most of the طلاب العلم in the مشايخ are not. That's the reality. They're not. And so when we go back and we look at World War II, and we see how war had an impact on this society and it pulled women out of the house. And when we go back and we look at some of the social movements that occurred, like in the 60s and so on and so forth, in the sexual revolution, and we see how that was a response that was taking place before, in culturally speaking. And so when we look at these types of environmental factors and structural factors, and we see that they definitely had a massive impact on the way that things were done. And we have to realize that we live in somebody else's reality, and sometimes that reality overlaps with ours, and sometimes it doesn't. And so when we look at the fact that push of the woman outside of the household, along with other things that were pushed, social movements and the solidification of the feminist movement, and how that went and how that reshaped the role of women, we have to realize, that at the end of the day, we have to have an understanding, of what is at stake. Roles have been redefined. And it's not to attack the feminist movement, because not everything in the feminist movement is against Islam. Some things we can find some basis in the prophetic liberation process. But not everything, is acceptable, because prophetic liberation is not just individual liberation. It's not just about me and me accomplishing what I want. You understand what I'm saying? It's about us as well. And that's where, that's where liberalism and feminism overlaps, and that there's still a lack of redefinition of what does it mean once you liberate a woman from Western Eurocentric models. What is her relationship to the rest of society, and what is her relationship to family? And so there's definitions and there's realities that are there that definitely are problematic for us as Muslims. But there's no doubt that the economy has shifted roles. Right? And so our expectations sometimes when it comes to economics, and males too, males expect certain things, brothers expect certain things that is just unrealistic. Things that in the Sharia, or in the fiqh, I should say, in the thinking of the scholars on the Sharia, you'll find that sometimes in the fiqh is more what people will call in this society liberal than the Muslims, stuff like that. In some schools of fiqh, I'm not promoting this at all, right? But I'm saying if we want our stuff to work, we have to realize this. In the fiqh, there's some schools of thought that say, look, the role of the woman is to just, at basic level, when we start talking about role of the woman is look pretty and just be there for her partner intimately. That type of discussion in today's time will cause a lot of havoc from every side. From one side, they'll say, well, what are you saying? The woman is a piece of meat. And from the other side, it will be like, what are you saying? You don't want her to cook for me, dude? You know what I'm saying? So, there's things that are really, we really had to sit down and have mature discussions. That's the point. Now, when we come to the issue of sex and intimacy, wallahi, the issue of sex and intimacy is a very confused issue. You understand what I'm saying? And in this age of sexification, pornographication of society, and so on and so forth, and youth that have grown up, in this society, and they have looked at women in a particular way, and we understand ourselves as objects, not as beings, both men and women. We understand ourselves as objects. This has led to a situation in which, hold on a second, let me hurry up and rush to get this late. This is like wrestling over here driving. So I had to calm down from my adrenaline rush. So when we talk about sex and intimacy, people have massive problems in their sex lives. And so, there's, we have not talked about sex properly, and we have allowed sex, which is part of not talking about it properly. We haven't really prepared ourselves for what sex means. And then, the whole concept of sex, a lot of times is based off of distortion, meaning that I hate to say it, people, but there's too many concepts, which is I'll just say it like this, just to be couth about it. It's too vulgar. It's too vulgar. You understand what I'm saying? It's not about husband and wife in a loving relationship. It's about how can I get my groove on? You know what I'm saying? And it's about how can I maximize, on pleasure. Like it's like, how can I go to a 5-star restaurant? Or how can I get, mashallah, that endorphin rush after I went swimming. We're thinking on one level, which is the chemical level, and we're not thinking about the role of sex in terms of relationship, in terms of community, in terms of society, in terms of spirituality. It's more complicated than just, the physical release, people. That's the reality. If you want to have a successful relationship. Why do I say that? Because if you're in a relationship which is stressed out, and you're stressed out, and what it comes down to is that your sex relationship is like your intimacy on the physical level. Hold on a second. Let me go back to your sexual encounter with your partner. I don't want to collapse intimacy and sex right now. It's only like twice a month. You have to look at what's going on in the relationship. How, and that's what brings us into intimacy. You don't have any other way to bond with your partner. You understand what I'm saying? And then there's the issue of we have to start being real. A lot of us, we're in positions where we're not cool with ourselves. And so our sex appetite is not where it should be. It's imbalanced for a number of different reasons. And so then what happens with that is that pushes people towards other extremes. Like either going deeper into the whole sex thing, or just trying to go spiritual, and then they swing back. It's all imbalanced. That's because we haven't invested in knowledge. We haven't invested in development. We haven't invested in thinking. People, they get mad at the Jewish community and so on and so forth. But I'm going to be honest with you, as a religious community, they have talked about these issues pretty thoroughly. The same thing with the Catholics. You know what I'm saying? Even the general Christian body, even the non-Muslims that are not believing in the faiths of the books, they talk about these issues. Who doesn't talk about these issues? We don't talk about these issues. The Muslims don't talk about these issues. So at the end of the day, it's not going to be cool, with brothers watching pornographies and sisters going and having sex toy parties, and everybody's discussing about their sex relationship, and then they're coming back. And that's at the it's not at the necessarily at the the couth level, so to speak. It may not, it may be problematic, but there's worse things that are going on. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about the whole concept of duty and responsibility. We have to understand, duty and romance. We have to have an understanding that marriage before was based on duty. And then if people were refined, romance would develop in that relationship. People, they married based on certain, and then that goes back to the issue of compatibility, how it was understood in the past. We come from a similar background. What can you provide? This is what my role, this, that. So all of these things overlap with each other. One of the powerful things about the duty relationship, that it's not about how I feel in this relationship about you. It's about what I'm doing for you, and I owe you, and that type of thing. that has its problem. There's no doubt that that needs its own discussion. But one of the things about that is that it was about responsibility to a certain extent. And did it fail on some occasions? Yes, it did. Does it have problems? Yes. But that whole angle of responsibility, and I'm going to stick with it, you know what I'm saying? We've lost that in the whole concept of marriage as romance. Right? You know, marriage about all my feelings. Oh, you know, he looks so good. You know, wow, she's so hot. You know, that whole, you know, I'm really feeling, you know, that because then what happens when that vibe or that feeling goes away? Are you in it still? You understand what I'm saying? Or now does your eyes go somewhere else? You know, and so then there's also the concept of how we take care of ourselves. You know, there's that whole joke that happens in society that as soon as people get married, they gain 15 pounds. Sure, we should look handsome and we should look beautiful for each other. There's no doubt about that. You understand what I'm saying? We should be excellent. You know, but there's a lot of things that we need to rethink. You know what I mean? We need to go back. You know, some contemporary concepts will help us rethink and help us re-examine the thinking in Islamic tradition. And we have to go back to the sources. We have to go back to the example of the Prophet ﷺ and his wives, you know, and see how that operated, and see what is we pull, and also the Sahaba. Like look at Sulaim. Sulaim, she converted Talha. You know, basically she converted him. And today, if a sister converts somebody, we're all up in arms. When this is sisters and some, you know, I laugh at that because I look at sisters. You know, their sisters revive something that was dead. Yeah, they see a man that he has certain qualities. Can it go bad? Yes, it can go bad. But you know, it's not in every case. We've seen some cases where some brothers have been converted, you know, and it has worked out. And they have become solid Muslims. And because they're in love with those sisters, you know, the men, they kind of, you know, in other words, there's a certain type of finesse that women have. How you use it, you know what I'm saying, over the man. Do you use it for development, or do you use it for the goddess complex? So that he worships you, so that, you know, you're everything and you replace Allah. I mean, that is a fact. This is the society in which the goddess complex is dominant. You know what I'm saying? And it starts getting really strange and weird, you know, at a certain point. But it's also a society in which men have been abusive. You know what I'm saying? And where, you know, women have been negated. Even up to now, women are negated. You know what I'm saying? You know, women are still negated, you know, with the whole concept of objectification of women. As long as that still remains, you know, and women participate in that and they push their whole industry. You know, but as long as that remains, there's no true liberation, you know, at the end of the day. But the point being, you know, is that we have to realize that there's there's dynamicisms. You know, there's sometimes when we go back to the past, you know, I'm not talking about the tradition of the scholars. I'm talking about when we go back to the prophetic examples, and we see relationships that are more dynamic, relationships that are way more dynamic. You know, like look at Khadija. You know, look at Khadija. You know what I'm saying? How Khadija was, you know, operational. Look at how Khadija, look at her role, the role that she played. You know, she was in a position of power. You know what I'm saying? And look at the role that she played. She was older, and look at that dynamic of marrying an older person and so on, and you know, inequalities and wealth status and all that type of stuff. So we have to realize that Muslim civilization reached some sort of homeostasis. It kind of reached this plateau, and so things kind of just stayed the same. And so a lot of these discussions, we can still benefit from them. I'm not saying that throw them out or whatever is a new age. I'm not talking like that, but I'm saying that it is a new age, and not everything the way that it was done can be applied, and it won't be just if we try to apply it. You can't have a sister that is working full-time plus, and she has kids, and then and you expect her to come home, you know, and wash the clothes and take care of the kids and clean the house, and you just chilling back. That doesn't make any damn sense. I'm sorry to talk like that, but there's no doubt somebody's gonna burn out. Somebody's gonna get frustrated. It's not going to lead to a relationship, especially when the prophetic model is one in which there's cooperation in the household. And that's why I said, you know, the role issue, You know, the role issue is one of the most from what I'm seeing, the role issue is one of the most problematic, you know, in the relationships. The sex issue is another very problematic, you know what I'm saying, point. And understanding intimacy is not just at the physical. You understand what I'm saying? We have to, I hate to use this term, but I have to use it because it just comes to mind. We have to evolve. You know, we have to evolve to a higher level of consciousness, which will bring us back to the prophetic example. We have to evolve emotionally. We have to evolve instinctually, meaning our look at how is it that we operate with our sex drive, you know, and our physical instincts. It's ridiculous that you can have the Hindus have a discussion on sex, the Buddhists, I'm sorry, you know, that they have discussions on sex, and the Hindus as well, and we don't have discussions on sex. That's just a reality. That's part of life. You know what I'm saying? And so that brings us back to the issue and their discussions are not vulgar. Their discussions are not vulgar like in this society. You know, their discussions are rooted on the role of instinct, on the role of spirituality, on the role of intimacy, you know, on the role of growth. And so we have to realize that those things were discussed as well, you know, in Islamic medicine, what they called Islamic medicine in the past. But we need to evolve emotionally. We need to evolve on what does spirituality mean beyond the individual as a couple, and the level of communication. We need to, you know, talk about how economics, what is the role of economics with each other. You know, there's all of these dynamics that necessitate, you know what I'm saying, that necessitate us having a sense. Sorry, guys, looking for parking and it's not working now. So that, you know, they necessitate for us, you know, an understanding of growth, you know, and where we need to be, you know, because how we're doing it now is not working for us. And I'll leave with that. Assalamu alaikum. Yes, we have completely mechanized the whole process, and even with that, it doesn't work. You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't work. And part of the issue is because the way that we discuss Islam, it doesn't have to do with our personal development. And we've separated spirituality from human growth, and we separated spirituality from our relationship to others, especially in the marriage context. And that was not the case. Although Imam al-Ghazali, rahmatullahi alayhi, in his adab, you know, the etiquettes of marriage, he has some statements in there that I find troubling, especially towards women. And he had, historically, if you look at his biography, something was going on in his family life. You know, that he had abandoned his family in complete. But he says, and this is where we have to be creative. Like, I think that his etiquettes of marriage is a good place to start. And to leave it as is, with his positions and how they're problematic. And I think that it's a situation where we can dialogue problematic ideas for today's time. But also he has some insights that are dynamic. So I think he provides a framework for where we can dialogue on what's problematic and what's not problematic, what needs reform, and also what needs revival. And he gives us a framework. You know, he gives us a framework, and I found some things to be extremely useful. But in itself, is it workable? No, I don't think by itself is workable. Because again, like I said, like some things that he mentions, you know, they're just not, some of the opinions that he has, I personally feel uncomfortable. And I love Imam al-Ghazali. I have daughters. So some of the things that he mentions about women, you know, they're somewhat problematic. But that's why I said we need to be in a dialogue between this time period, and I implied it actually, I didn't say it clearly, but between the prophetic examples, between where we're at and where the tradition is at, and we need to evolve. We need to evolve. That doesn't mean we cancel out everything and so on and so forth, but we need to evolve. We need to be in a position where we evolve. That's important. You know what I'm saying? It's important that we السلام عليكم. ما في باركينج يعني أريد باركينج في الداخل. بارك الله فيك. So, you know, that's just, sorry about that. So that's just, you know, I think that, you know, we failed. We failed on a lot of these fronts. And it's this part. Okay, people, sorry. I don't want to start rambling. We need to evolve. And I'll leave it with that. The discussion is not a discussion that doesn't need continuation. It's not, you know, it's not exhaustive. That's just the reality. So we leave with that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi